Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Thank you so much for coming to the first ASU Democrats versus Republicans live debate. Hopefully the first of many to come. We usually film our show downtown at Cronkite on the 6th floor, and Carlos is our esteemed Republican. Michael is our Democrat, and we decided we'd bring it out to the masses today and open it up to questions from the audience. So, without any further ado, I am your moderator, Nihal Krishan, a junior at Arizona State University studying political science and journalism. We are currently filming from the Memorial Union, the MU, at Arizona State University in Tempe. With me on my left is Michael Martinez, National Chair of the Young Democrats of America College Caucus and a political science major at ASU. Jordan Ashley Hibbs, an outgoing USG Senator for Barrett's Honors College and a senior majoring in psychology with a minor in political science. Anthony Musa, the Finance Director for Kristie O'Brien for Senate and a junior majoring in political science. And last but not least on the Democrat side is Brendan Pantilione, Campaign Manager for Janie Hydrick for Senate and a senior majoring in interdisciplinary studies. Thank you for coming. On my right, we have the College Republicans, starting with Carlos Alfaro, the ASU College Republicans President and an economics and history major at ASU. Tyler DiGrazia, the Secretary of the College Republicans, who will be graduating this spring with a degree in political science. Sean McCauley, former state press columnist and a history and politics major at ASU. And last of all, Devon Ironside, a junior at ASU majoring in American history and who is also a first-generation immigrant from Canada. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to be covering 4 topics over the span of today's debate. First of all, the role of government and taxes. Second, education policy. Third, guns. And lastly, immigration. There will be time for questions from the audience at the end. So you'll have plenty of time to express your opinions, beliefs, and grill the speakers yourself. So we're going to be starting off with the role of government, and the Democrats have very graciously allowed the Republicans to go first. So the first question of the debate is, we can gain an understanding of the appropriate role of government by deciding what services it should and should not provide to its citizens. In the United States, what services do you think our taxes should be providing? Whether it be food stamps and aid for the poor, health care through Medicaid or Medicare, retirement benefits through Social Security, and education through public schools. Seeing that these form some of the largest portions of our federal budget and parts of our local, state, and county budgets. What do you have to say?
Well, I want to thank everybody. Can everybody hear me? Okay? Because I'm a little bit away from the mic. I want to talk about numbers. I want to talk about the debt and how having a $17.5 trillion debt affects us and how our future generations are going to be enslaved by this debt and we have to eventually pay it off. But I think it's even more important to talk about the actual people that are being affected by these policies. The policies in the ideology that says government can take care of you, government can give you food, a job, housing, education. There's real consequences that happen from these, and they're not just an education, they're not just a job or a house, but there's also unintended consequences. And people like Milton Friedman, Frederick Hayek, Ayn Rand, these are the people that kind of talked about it, saw the policies and what they were doing, and wrote against it. So I encourage all of you to not just listen to us or go to our club meetings and listen to what we have to say in agreement with each other, but I also encourage you to go read Ayn Rand and Atlas Shrugged and Milton Friedman's book, Free to Choose, and all that stuff. So ideologically is how we win this, not through just campaigns and politics, but through an ideological battle. In 1964, we started this war on poverty, just like we started the war on terrorism and the war on drugs, and government has kind of placed itself as the leader in these wars. The bureaucrats and politicians come out to say, we need this new program, we need this new office, we need this new power in order to fix your social problem. In 1964, it was poverty. It was at about 19.3%, and they enacted this war on poverty, which included welfare, and put trillions and trillions of dollars into it. Hundreds of programs later, decades later, after all these people have been affected, the poverty rate hasn't fallen below 15%. A 4% change over decades and trillions of dollars spent is not success, it's a failure. The real people that are getting affected are the people that get into the system, a cycle of poverty and a cycle of dependency. what I want to talk about is that welfare, when the government takes care of your needs and when the government gives you special rights, they also have the ability to take those away. We aren't given rights by government, but we hold these rights as human beings, and they're inherent to ourselves. And anytime the government has a rule or a law or a policy, no matter what party pushes it, that breaks these rights, they're in the wrong and they're becoming tyrannical. The government should do courts. The federal government should do courts and a justice system and defense for the nation. And we should leave the states to do everything else. If California wants to have a welfare system and everything that comes attached to that, the debt, the hungry people, anything that comes with the welfare state, they can have that. But if Arizona doesn't want it, if we have more savvy business people and people coming here to live, we should allow for that kind of change in our system. That's the experimental part of our republic. We should embrace that, and we should let the states take care of the social problems. We should even let the cities and the individual business take care of them, not politicians in Washington thousands of miles away.
Okay. Democrats, what do you think is the appropriate role for government to have in the United States today, specifically talking about some of the issues that we've marked upon?
Well, I mean, first thing I want to say is, I've said this before, it's easy to trivialize 4%. 19% down to 15% poverty rate, or poverty percentage. It may only be 4%, but what that translates into is about 13.2 million people who are no longer in poverty. So I think the key thing to remember about this is government is not business. Our priority is not to make money. Our priority is to help people and make sure that there's no one in our country who is living having trouble, paying for somewhere to sleep, paying for food to eat, kids going hungry. This is the kind of things that are continue to affect our country. And 13.2 million people is not something to be trivialized. Those 13.2 million people, their lives are tremendously better because of the war on poverty. Now, I'm not saying it's been totally successful. We still have a lot of work to do. And a lot of that work comes from the safety net that we have in place, especially in times of economic distress, like we have been since, let's say, 2007, 2008, around then. We have to be able to take care of our citizens. That's just the bottom line. We cannot allow our own people to be suffering. And when we cut programs like this, that's who gets hurt. The people at the bottom. And we can't just turn our backs on them. So we have a responsibility to our fellow Americans to make sure that they have a place to live, that they have food to eat, that their children are being educated. And this is stuff that shouldn't be left to the private sector, especially when the private sector is not stepping up. And so our government does have the responsibility to make sure that all of our, that's a fundamental responsibility of a government, is to protect our citizens. And so in this regard, that's what has to happen with social safety nets.
I completely agree with that, actually. I think that we should. Our responsibility is to look for the welfare of our fellow citizens. But when these programs take trillions of dollars to run, and when these people are still hungry and are still not being able to put food on their table because of the amount of taxes that we're taking away from them, because of the inefficiencies of the programs that you're saying, the antiquated idea of government fixing everything is actually hurting those that you want to help. There is no change for the board.
I would agree with you that there shouldn't be waste, but even like if you go back 20 years and you look at another country like the United Kingdom, even their most conservative Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, kept the NHS, their national health system, which is a form of their socialized medicine there, even because she thought that it was necessary to have a safety net for the people. And you would think that someone that conservative would get rid of NHS and make a requirement to have private health care, but she didn't. She kept a public option because people shouldn't need to want for something. If you go to the United Kingdom, you get free health care. And that's another option of where should the role in government be? Well, it should be in providing every citizen with the right to live and the right to have health care and the right to have education.
And I agree that waste is an issue that we need to take care of, but my question would be, what number is too high of a number for 13.2 million people? Like, where's your cutoff? Is $1 billion, is that how much we can spend to make sure 13.2 million people don't live in poverty? Or you know, $1 trillion, where's it come up with that? How much are these people's lives worth to you?
And this is something that you'll hear over and over throughout the debate, is our opponents saying, if we just do a little more, if we just spend a little more money, this is what you hear from politicians, this is what you hear from government bureaucrats. If we just put a little more money and adjust the system, it will work. We've tried this. This is an antiquated idea. The people coming up with the new ideas are those that go against those systems that haven't worked in the past.
It's not spending a little more, it's spending smarter. We don't have to just throw money at things, but what we would say is we would spend smarter. Cut the waste, make sure that everyone's being provided for, and making sure that people have the...
Can I clarify here, just for the audience, to make sure they understand that poverty is not a static thing. Poverty is merely a percentage of people who are below a certain threshold of income. And people do not stay in poverty their entire lives when you have economic freedom, because you have economic mobility. That's why people come to America. They don't come for social safety nets. They come because of economic freedom. And so that economic freedom allows them to go from perhaps making not as much to making more. That's the opportunity of America.
Well, what would you say to someone, for example, you say economic freedom, but go back to the Great Depression or something, when there wasn't the ability to get a job, when there wasn't the ability to work, what did they have to do? They had to create social welfare programs, government projects to get people jobs and to get people moving forward.
And after they created those projects, unemployment went back up. There was a second recession, second depression created by FDR in 36 and 37. So the projects actually didn't do anything.
I do want to add one more thing to this. Well, welfare system, as we've seen throughout the country, produces nanny laws. In New York, it translated into a soda ban. You can't sell a soda that's 20 ounces or more. That nanny law had the standing. It had standing because we pay for a portion of the cost of people with diabetes and people that choose bad habits. When we're paying for each other's healthcare, when we're paying for each other's food, then the government has the right to tell you which food you can eat, what places you can go to, what education books are right and wrong. That's the problem. Welfare state equals nanny state.
Well,
if we don't want those nanny laws, then we have to fight the root of it.
So rather than focusing on larger issues, why don't we take a more nuanced look at some of the things that government does have a role in? So, Carlos, you mentioned that you think that courts and defense is where the federal government should be having a role, and everything else should be left to the state. So, specifically focusing on what we've been talking about with food stamps or healthcare and education, on the state level, what do you think that the government should be having a role in, and what do you think we should be privatizing, looking at specific roles in specific industries?
And the reason why I bring it back to the states is because of this. Imagine this, you can cut every single government function, defense, parks, schools, education, all that, and just leave Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and we would still be over budget. I see that as not only a little failure or a little waste, that's a huge failure of government. That's a huge break in the system. The reason I want to bring it back to the states is because not everybody gets affected by bad policies. The problem here is not the people, but it's the government and the politicians that gain from these sort of policies. If somebody in Washington wants to make a law that promotes his political campaign, but at the expense of some people suffering, 300 million people have to suffer through that. If the state chooses to do a wrong decision or whatever, it only affects the people in that state, and then we have states competing for inhabitants and for business. This is a much better system. This is the system that our founders gave us. And having it just top down, let's have one rule for everybody is not realistic, and it's why we have these problems.
They did have that. It was called the Articles of Confederation, and it felt miserable.
It's right.
The other problem with that is you say that you're competing for people from state to state, but the people who are most benefited by the programs that we were just discussing are the people that don't have the ability, the economic mobility to move from state to state. If you are the person who's on welfare, who's needing public education, who's needing public health care, you do not have the economic mobility to move from one state to the state that's providing better welfare. So in theory, that sounds great. Competition is great. We're America. We love competition. But if you're the person that needs it, you're SOL. That's why we decided that in Roe v. Wade that abortion is legal everywhere because people don't always have the financial means to move to where it is that they need those services.
But when you have a law affecting everyone economically, you not only not give the choice to people that are less well off, but everyone in the country. You have to know that government doesn't work. Government creates unintended consequences, and when things go wrong, it's better to minimize the impact than make it just for everyone.
Carlos, we have a say. That's what Congress is. We elect those people to Congress. We can unelect them. We don't have to put them back to Congress if they're not putting them. And let me just.
What's the
hold on.
If you inherently believe
You're
that
right.
government is wrong, how can you participate in the system?
You're absolutely right. Congress level of approval is so low, and we need to take care of that. We need to get people out of Congress that shouldn't be there, and keep the people out there actually working. And let me remind you that most people who are on social welfare programs actually need them. They're not abusing the system. I grew up with some of those services, and now my mother, my sister, myself, my stepdad, we're in a better place because the government was able to provide us with the opportunity to better ourselves. That's what we're forgetting.
And I think I agree with you on the fact that Congress in general, if we don't like them, unelect them, that's another option that you have. If you don't, I personally think in general, like most Americans, Congress sucks. There's like a, 1% approval rate or something, but if you don't like someone, you can unelect them, and if you don't like their policies, you can address it with your congressperson. And the reason that we have all of these programs is because of Congress. So I don't really understand what the point you were making there with what the point of Congress was.
So I'd like to shift the direction of the conversation regarding the role of government to consent. I think consent is something that's very important when deciding what the government should or shouldn't be doing. So Democrats, a lot of Republicans argue that even if the government is providing services that are raising the standard of living, are improving people's lives, if there's a significant percent of the population that is not consenting to their money being used to improve other people's lives, then even if it is improving their lives, arguably so, is that fair? Is that morally just? If their money is being taken from them without their consent?
I don't consent to two wars being waged that shouldn't have been waged. The problem is that when we have a Congress, we take the good with the bad. I don't want so much money being spent on defense, but that's the way it happens because we do live in a country where it's a nearly 50-50 split of what we believe in. So we have to work together. I give you guys defense spending. I want social welfare programs. That's what compromise is.
That's the reality of government, right?
Well, that's what the shooting founding fathers wanted. Compromise.
It's people with money and power fighting over who gets more money and more power. How is that giving a solution?
I have
that's
a
a
great
problem.
solution actually. If you want to consent, if you think government is stealing from you and you feel like you need to consent, and if you don't agree, then let's go to Somalia where there isn't a government, and then you can have your fun without paying taxes.
When we enslave other generations with debt, when we have a $17.5 trillion debt that we owe and we have to pay, this is not improving people's lives.
Okay.
Just because we're improving a little bit, a small portion of somebody's life, doesn't mean that everybody is benefited. In fact, most of us are going to hurt. The Social Security system is hurting.
So Republicans, regarding consent, on the other hand, if you look at the data, a majority of Americans do want the government to be providing them health care through Medicaid and Medicare, retirement through Social Security, free education through public schooling. And so if a majority of people do consent to that, then what do you have to say about the fact that your tax dollars are going towards that, when most Americans do want the government to be providing?
Well, they're going bankrupt, so whether they want it or not, they're not going to have it. So if you want to keep on having it, you need to make reforms in that regard. But politicians in Washington, as Carlos has mentioned, don't really have an incentive to do that. While our Democratic friends think that we should spend smartly, invest smartly, well, who's going to stand up here and disagree with that? Obviously, we want to spend smartly, but politicians in Washington have absolutely no incentive to do so. And the only incentive they're going to have to actually cut anything is when you demand dramatic overhaul of those systems. But anytime that you just leave it to politicians to just try and spend that money smartly, it's not going to happen.
Well, define overhaul.
Yeah.
You guys are settling for McDonald's when In-N-Out Burger is right across the street. It's as simple as that. Just because
Why do we have to have
something
either?
I'm sorry, there are more efficient options, and competition through the free market will give those people more efficient means, better Social Security, for instance. Privatize it.
Hold on.
It becomes better for everyone.
You want to talk about Social Security? How about we remove the cap so that millionaires don't pay the same rate as someone making $100,000 a year? We remove that, Social Security remains solvent. for at least 20 years.
Again, put more money into it. Let's put more money into it. In fact,
No,
Chile
pay
did the exact
your
opposite.
fair
They went with a
share.
new approach.
Pay your fair share.
No, they went with a new approach, and that was choice. They gave you a choice when you were entering the job force. Do you want the government to handle your retirement, or do you politicians and bureaucrats, or do you want the private system and stockbrokers to handle it?
Well, yeah.
Chile chose overwhelmingly to go to the private system, and they have more money in their social security system.
Well,
It's safe.
I would
We
ag-
tried something new there.
I would
It's
agree
the
with
same thing.
I would agree with some of that, but let's look back at somewhere else that invested their a company that invested their retirement privately. Enron did that, and then all those people lost their retirement, their jobs. They ended up with stocks that were worth about $80, were worth about a penny, and
They
now
lost
have
it because
no
of
retirement.
fraud, not because of the free market. If you're
That
gonna
is the
claim that,
free
well,
market.
because-
There
yeah,
was
because
no
crime happened.
regulation. That was
regulation.
literally
That bad.
they literally took the regulation off of the energy market, let them do whatever they wanted, swap things around, and it was fraud because there was no regulation.
And not to mention, no, it is a free market.
That is your
A free
definition of the
market
free
is
market.
free of regulations. That's the free market. And how about all the people that lost money in their 401ks because of the investment bankers that collapsed the housing market in 2008.
The investment bankers that were required to give subprime loans by government regulation through Fannie and Freddie.
And those loans were backed by them. In
They
a
weren't
free market,
fired to do
businesses
anything.
don't want to give a loss, right? Don't want to get a loss, so they would have never gave these fraudulent loans, these loans that were not going to get paid back unless the government. backed
They
them.
weren't fraudulent. They got a profit off of those. You got those off of subprime mortgages and
totally.
mortgage-backed securities. There was a profit that they were making. It wasn't
That
like
was
they were just-
guaranteed by the
With a
government
promise, with
because
a
the
promise
government
that
wanted to buy votes.
Guys,
No.
we're gonna move on to our next topic, a topic which is very close to us here at ASU, which is education policy. We're gonna start with the Democrats this time. Do you support school choice through a voucher or scholarship program, thus forcing schools to compete for students and resources, or the traditional model that we've had thus far, where students attend public schools in their district? Anthony.
Sorry. I don't have an issue. I went to parochial school. I went to a private school. I don't necessarily have an issue with having a choice with where you go to school. What I do have an issue with is taking money out of what's there for public schools and giving it to the private schools, to charter schools without any regulation, where the teachers don't have to take the same tests, where they're not under the same regulation, and where they're not bound by the same laws as a teacher in a public school. I believe that you should have the opportunity to send your kid, if you want to send him to a charter school, send him to a charter school. You want to send him to a parochial school, and because you are Catholic, send him to a parochial school. But the teachers need to have some sort of testing that's the same as the public school. They need to make sure the public schools get the same funding. There needs to be competition with both the public schools and the private schools. You can't just siphon all the money that's there for public schools and give it to the private schools.
And that's
So if you're going to allow students to go to different schools and allow charter schools to exist, it's not possible for the public schools to be getting the same funding. The funding is going to have to shift in order to allow students to be going to different schools than they were before.
Right, but they should make sure that the public schools are still getting the same amount of funding.
I think what Anthony's saying is we shouldn't be cutting public school budgets to fund charters and private schools. Now, I'm all for choice too, but we need to remember, when I was in high school, I went to a public district school, I went to a charter school, and I went to a public alternative school. So I've experience in all three types of these. The only thing I don't have is a private school. But the point of the school choice program was to find new, innovative ways to bring into our public district schools that would help our students rise to a new level. The problem is that with all this money that's been put into school choice, the only thing we figured out is that we need to pay teachers more, keep the good ones, and keep school classes small. That's not new. That's something we've known for a while. Now, if we put that into public district schools, put that into our district schools, what we need to do is start funding them at a decent level. Because right off the base, there's a reason why public district schools are turning their district schools into charter schools, because they get more money per student. If we paid the same rate that we did to charter schools, then we see a vast improvement. And if we're talking about voucher programs, all it's trying to do is privatize our school system, and all that
So
means.
we're gonna have to turn it over to
I
the
would say
Republicans.
to say that a school in the a school in the inner city that has a dropout rate of 70%, to say that the solution for that, I mean, I was lucky enough to go to school in Scottsdale, and I had a choice in education. I went to a good high school, and I came to a better country and bettered my life. But for the people that don't have the ability to do that, the people living in the inner cities with lower incomes, they're the ones that are suffering from the lack of choice. Because now they're trapped in these schools and in their zip codes, rather than given the choice to go to a charter school or a private school. When you said, let's fund them equally, not only is that incorrect because we have to spread the money to the public or the private schools and the charter schools, but how can you say that a public school that's failing at a 70% dropout rate, all they need to succeed is more money? That's not the solution. That's what we've been trying.
Well, I didn't mean fund
We need to
equally.
eliminate that school. We need to eliminate those teachers. In the private market, that school would be gone.
Yeah, but this isn't, that's the beauty about it. It's not the public market. We have to have, or it's not a private market. We have to have a public choice.
Anthony, I think we're going to let Anthony speak.
Oh, okay. I didn't mean fund equal. I meant if we're going to make sure that we're going to give these vouchers to the schools, we should make sure that the public schools aren't being cut out. That's more what I meant.
What about the bad ones?
Why are they bad?
You wanna keep
Why are they bad?
No,
Exactly.
You're saying that there's money going to these charter schools because students are doing better, the parents like it, the students like it, teachers like it more, they're doing better with test scores, and the public schools are like, no, give us more money, but the kids are leaving those, the parents are taking them out of those because they're doing so poorly. So why would we be putting more money into that
Why
to
are
make
they
it
bad?
better?
Why are they bad? Because their class sizes are too big. That's why. We've gotten away from individualized training or education. That's the issue. We have our class sizes are too big for our teachers to individualize education, and so kids fall through the cracks.
But
And
what
then we
about-
say, oh no, let's give them a way to let's take money away from that school because they're not performing well. Let's make sure the kids can go somewhere else. No, that's not solving the issue.
Why can't that be solving the issue? Okay, we'll have a different option for the student instead of keeping them there and trying to fix it where it is. No, let the student go to a place where they have choice that's working. It's successful. Charter schools are successful. In New Orleans, they're in all charter school district now. After Hurricane Katrina, they changed everything, and they had a 65% they failed to meet the standards. And after a few years of that, only 6% of students are failing to meet standards. So how can we say that it's only partially privatizing too, because charter schools are still publicly funded. How can we say that that's not working?
Yeah, and when people are sitting down waiting for a ball in a lottery for their kid to get into the good school, that's when the broken system happens.
By hundreds and thousands of people are on these waiting lists. That has to tell us that people want that.
Okay,
So why
thank
would
you.
we tell them?
Brendan.
I was going to actually concede that point that charter schools are public school. They're publicly funded schools. And I don't think any of us at this table has a problem with charter schools. What we're just asking is that if we are giving public money to these schools, that they be held to some sort of accountability standards. Because there are some charter schools that are doing great work. My stepmom is a teacher at Basis. I don't think anyone can say that Basis is a bad school. However, in the district that I grew up in, there are bad charters, and the students that end up at those charters end up worse than if they stayed in, yes, the public schools where you do have the awful dropout rates, but it's those most vulnerable students that we need to be making sure we're accounting for. So I don't think any one of us at this table disagrees with charter schools, so I think we're having the wrong fight. What we're arguing is that there has to be some sort of equitable accountability standards if we are using the public tax dollars for these schools.
Charter schools will be.
We're gonna move on to our next question, which is Republicans. What do you think of federal standards and state initiatives within education, like the Common Core or the Race to the Top by President Obama, or No Child Left Behind by President Bush, etc., vis-a-vis giving more power and control to states and individual school boards and districts in regards to standards and how and what we teach?
I would say we saw No Child Left Behind not work, and we are seeing Common Core not work either. In New York, they've tried those standards, and for math and science, the kids fell from 79th percentile to the 39th percentile. It's not working. It's just a different way of teaching that pushes an industrial model of learning. What we need to have is not federal standards mandated from Washington, D.C., but the individual states and individual schools testing their students differently so that we may find the most efficient ways. This is how the market works. You try different things in different parts of the cities with different students, and you're going to get better results because not every student is different, and we can't treat students like they're some sort of machine that we can just teach them the same thing at the same capacity and have it be just like a product. education.
We want competition in education, basically, because with competition, a better product is the result, because people compete.
Democrats, what do you think of federal standards and state initiatives like the Common Core?
Well, what I will say is that, okay, so I was in high school when Ames first came out, before it was a requirement. I was I think a senior the first year that they put it out there, and I think 50% of the people who took the test failed. So everyone freaked out. They're like, oh no, my student's not going to graduate. This is the same thing that's happened with Common Core. I was in the Senate Education Committee when they were giving a presentation on the PARCC exam, which would have moved us to Common Core standards to graduate. And it was that only 50% of the people who passed Ames would pass the PARCC. So it's not that the Common Core standards aren't working. It's that right now we're underachieving so badly that we can't meet Common Core standards. We shouldn't be getting rid of them, but they should be acting as a floor, not the ceiling. Our students can meet those standards, but we need to give the local education agencies the ability to do it. We need to make sure they're funded the right way, and that they have the ability to hire enough teachers to individualize education. Because if we do that, then Common Core will work.
But one last point from Carlos.
Yeah, I mean, we've seen education funding go from $5,000 per pupil to over $10,000 per pupil now. I mean, if you see a chart of that, nationwide, and the scores remain the same. And that's the issue. It's not about the money or the funding. It's the way we teach. And the difference between education between that side and this side is that we have different ideas. But I'm not willing to push mine through government force and through government rules. They are. That's what Common Core is. It's a pushing of standards onto the states and onto the student.
I think that you may be mistaken with what Common Core is. It's not a way of teaching. It's not a federally mandated way of teaching. It's a standard so that if you live in one state, you're being measured to students in another state, and where you live isn't determining what standard you're being held to. So it's not a way of teaching. It's not, this is how you teach your ABCs. This is where you should be at, whatever way you want to get there.
And
Well,
it's also
actually-
it's a state-led initiative, not a federal initiative. Let's just put that out there.
Actually, without getting into how it started, because we can argue that separately. The back to Jordan's point, it actually is a way of teaching, because I know parents and I know young kids who they have to learn how to add and subtract by using a number line, and they have to do their homework this way. And instead of just teaching them, okay, take away this many, or use your fingers to count, they have to do these different processes. So it is teaching them a different way, and these kids are frustrated, and the parents can't help them because they don't know what's going on, and it's just not a good system.
Not only that, there's real results. There's real results, and you can see them in
Okay,
New York.
we're going to have one last point, and we're going to move on to guns. Do you have a last point, Brandon?
Sure. So a lot of the examples that I see floating around the internet, which I'm assuming you're alluding to, are things that are not new. I come from a family of teachers who are adjusting to the Common Core standards. A lot of these things aren't new, and a lot of the things aren't necessarily what is being mandated. It's a set of standards that's being held. The individual curriculum is left up to the states and to the districts. So things like number lines, those have existed since we were in kindergarten. These aren't anything new. It's just suddenly we're blaming everything on Common Core.
And real quick, we had the same discussion in Utah. They flipped out about Common Core standards. I talked to their State Board of Education. They adopted the exact same standards, made math a little bit easier, and incorporated cursive into their curriculum, and everything was okay all of a sudden. So it's not Common Core, it's the perception of Common Core.
Okay, so we're going to move on to guns, a topic that has impacted a lot of school campuses around this country. So Democrats, we'll start with you. How do you think we can decrease the amount of homicides and violence that results from guns, particularly in reference to mass shootings, which there have been many of in the past few years?
Now, I'm a gun owner. I have several guns. I'm also an instructor in teaching people how to get a CCW permit. But the state of Arizona and Governor Brewer decided that we don't need those anymore. Really, you don't have to have one unless you're in specific zones. And one of the biggest issues, I think, is we're basically saying you don't have to have any rules at all to own a firearm. You don't have to have any rules at all to go to take your gun anywhere you want. or have it concealed, have it open carry, have it in your car. And anyone, you know what, one of the biggest issues also is that it takes me less time to buy a new gun than it does to break a 50 at Starbucks. If I want to buy a gun, they run my number through a phone, and then someone from I don't know who does it, but someone gives them a number, and that clears me to buy a gun. The fact that if you have a mental illness, if you have a conviction of domestic violence, but it hasn't gone through the system yet, you can still buy one. The issue is we're letting people who have all these issues like mental illness or a history of domestic violence buy guns, and we're giving basically people we're the state with the least amount of gun restrictions to buy a gun and do whatever they want with it. And I think that, yes, I'm a firm believer in the Second Amendment, and I believe that you should have the right to have a gun, but we need to treat it smarter. We need to make sure that people who want to buy a gun are we make sure that they're safe to buy a gun. We make sure that people have the training to know when it's okay to fire a gun, because I've had people ask me some pretty weird questions of where it's okay for them to fire a gun, and I think that there needs to be training, and people need to know when it's okay to shoot.
And we also need universal background check. Should be a no-brainer. I don't understand how any one of us could walk into a gun show and walk out with an AR-15 without having a background check done.
Okay, we're going to move on to the Republicans. How do you think that we can decrease the amount of homicides and violence that specifically come from guns?
Homicides and violence don't come from guns. They don't result from guns. They come from homicidal people and violent people. So when you pin it on the guns, you're kind of tipping your hand. You're not actually wanting to deal with crime and mass shootings. You want to deal with a volatile issue that people feel scary about. Guns are tools just like cars and knives, and so you can use them to shoot, drive, and spread butter on bread. The people that actually are the agents behind them are the people that we should be taking a look at.
Right,
For instance,
which is why we're advocating for universal background checks. That's exactly what we just said.
Well, yeah,
I mean, the laws and regulations are going to impact
I
the
understand
people,
that.
not the guns
I understand that. I understand that. Right, but you have to understand that when Adam Lanza goes out and steals his mother's guns, background checks didn't.
But you
really
know
make a
that
difference
he used a firearm before. His mom took him out to shoot. And we're not letting people, giving them the right instructions. And you know what? I'm pretty sure she wasn't even keeping her guns in a safe place. I don't know how. I'm not too familiar with what she did, but I don't know if she kept them in a safe. I don't know if she kept them away from him, because you need to keep. One of the things that we always say is you should keep your guns in a safe. If you have small children, if you have someone in the house, you shouldn't have access to guns. I keep my guns in a safe. And that's even the education is important. The education to tell people to
Nobody's
do that.
debating the education here, but the fact that you have mentally ill people committing crimes, stealing firearms, and then going and blowing away rooms does not necessitate the destruction of the Second Amendment.
We're not
advocating for that.
The Second Amendment does not put any limits on the owning of firearms.
I think that the big assumption here is that on the other side, they assume that these laws work, right? Like drug laws, like prohibition in the 30s, they assume that just by saying no guns allowed, that guns are going to disappear overnight. We all know that if we put our minds to it, in the next hour we could probably find a gun. And that we don't need to go through background checks, that we don't need to go through any of these things.
Virginia Tech was a gun-free place.
Because the market is not stopped by some government crony in Washington, D.C., or by some nanny state person on the other side.
You're trying to figure out a law that a criminal will abide? Good luck with that.
We're not saying that no guns should be allowed. What we're saying is, if you want to buy a gun, prove that you're not a con. Prove that you don't have a history of domestic violence.
And prove you can be responsible with the thing you buy.
Okay, but if I'm a con, I'm not going to go try to prove myself. I'm just going to go steal someone else's gun.
Or I'll be good at conning my way into a gun.
Okay, so let's get rid of all laws then. Let's get rid of all laws, because there's always going to be someone that breaks
We're
the
talking
law.
about solutions, right? We're talking about how to actually decrease these things that happen.
Well, I haven't actually heard a solution
Here we go.
from you guys yet.
Solution number one. We talk about gun-free zones, and ASU, where we're standing right now, is supposed to be a gun-free zone. because a law says it somewhere and because there's a sign at the door.
And criminals abide laws, remember?
Right. These are made up. These are made up. They actually make us less safe. When a mentally deranged person goes and sees where he can cause the most damage, it's in these kinds of areas where people are disarmed and not able to use the tools that they
Well,
buy.
they just got rid of all the gun restrictions in Georgia, and they just had a mass shooting there. So either way, it doesn't work. You're
What
saying,
I'm saying is that there's a deterrent. Right now, we're in a zone where we're disarmed and where mentally deranged people target to go on these shootings.
Which I would maybe be able to agree with, except for the last time this came up in testimony, every single security officer from all of the universities testified that allowing everyone to have guns would make a scenario such as that less safe. I do believe that the people that are in charge of our security are the people that are most informed about what is going to keep us the most safe. So we can argue ideologies all day long, but when it comes down to it, if it is the police officers that keep us safe that are saying allowing more guns is only going to make the scenario more volatile, I don't know. Maybe I'm
Are you
naive,
saying-
but I
you're
tend
saying
to
that we're
trust
more-
someone with more knowledge than I do.
If someone with a gun walked in this room right now, you're saying we're more safe now without a gun in this room.
We're
than with a
saying
gun
that
in this
we're
room.
more safe with not everyone on 75,000 students on campus carrying a gun. We're more safe.
You're
without
misinterpreting our argument to say we're putting guns in people's hands. We're giving people the freedom of choice to defend themselves and not rely on people who have to be minutes away for their security.
Right, so the hypothetical scenario that was brought up in all of these committee hearings was what if Ethan stands up and starts shooting people? And Forrest here also has a gun. Forrest may be trained in how to take down Ethan. And so that's great. Ethan is now down. But then now, when the police come in to adhere to the scenario, they are going to shoot Forrest because they don't know that Forrest is not the bad guy. So
we're supposed to trust our security to police officers who can't differentiate between criminals and law-abiding citizens?
If you walk into a room where there's a mass
Is
shooting,
the other guy gonna start shooting at the cops too?
That's kind of a ridiculous question to me, because if you're a police officer, no matter how trained you are, if you walk into a room with someone holding a gun when you know shooting has happened, and that are you going to know immediately who was the one shooting? No, you're going to look and you're going to assess the situation, and you're going to say that person's holding a gun, he must be the problem.
No police officer is trained to shoot like that.
but again, we haven't. The question again was about how do we stop mass shootings or gun control. There's been no answer from. I haven't heard an answer. I've just heard let everyone have a gun, and that should somehow curb mass.
So I think in situations like this, sometimes looking at other countries internationally is a good way of trying to understand the problem. And if you look at countries that have had mass shootings in the past, like Australia or South Africa in the past, that have had serious problems with this, their use of laws and regulations to curtail people's access to guns has drastically decreased the number of mass shootings. And the data shows that. And if it's happening in other countries, why can't it happen here in the United States?
Because you have a Second Amendment, thank heavens for that. Because you have over 100, 200 million of guns in America, which would be impossible to remove, unlike just Australia. And because it just is not going to work in
firmly
America.
agree with you. Thank God for the Second Amendment. I love shooting. It's my favorite hobby. But you know what? Your argument doesn't make any sense. You're just saying, thank God for the Second Amendment, we have all these guns.
No, I said because you have a Second Amendment, you can't remove all the guns, which was the question.
Which
Why
is
can't
what
we
we're
not
not.
remove the guns like
We're
Australia?
not advocating to remove the guns. You can take the guns out of my dead hand too, but
We're not talking black and white of removing guns altogether. We're talking about regulation. We're talking about making it harder.
In Australia, they removed all the guns from people. So if you're going to use that example, you got to accept the consequences of it.
the example.
no.
Yes, it was used, like in Australia.
The Moderator.
And
Now,
that's
let me
why I'd
say,
answered
I
it.
will use an example of not New England, but Britain doing the same thing as Australia did and removing the guns. And how many homicides were there last year? You know?
Yeah, 56. Unfortunately, England only counts homicides after they've gone through trial and investigation and been convicted. So your statistic is wrong.
It's not really wrong. Because
Yeah,
that's-
it
that's-
is,
that's-
because it's-
That's proof. That's proof. You're saying after they were proven to kill somebody with their gun, will we count it? That's
No, after they were
proof,
tried and convicted,
Which is they have been proven guilty of committing that crime.
which is not the way the FBI runs their statistics. So to try and compare the two is completely false.
Go ahead. I want to know those numbers, though. What's
have an alternative?
numbers in the United States?
Okay,
You started mentioning numbers, not me.
We're going to move on to our last topic of the debate, which
I guarantee you it's more than
which is
56.
immigration. an issue that's close to a lot of our hearts here in Arizona. We'll start with you, the Republicans. What do you think is the best way to deal with illegal immigrants who already reside here, especially in Arizona, but in the greater United States as well, and deal with those who may desire to come to the U.S. in the future, whether it be through granting them residency visas, legislation like the Dreamers Act for children, or through deportation, securing of the border, and enforcement of current laws?
Yeah, I would say that the history of America is one filled with immigrants. It's one that was created by immigrants, and we are completely pro-immigrant. The right, at least on this side, supports an overhaul of our immigration system because we believe that we're unsafe with the current system that we have, and people are their rights are being violated by the current system that we have. If an immigrant wakes up, and I work with immigrants and on the immigration side of things in Arizona, and I've seen people that wake up and go to work and are always looking behind their backs because they're looking for an ICE agent, or business that wakes up and says, I don't know if Joe Arpaio crew is going to come and ransack me today, and I'm going to lose business for a week because they're going to shut me down. A free market means free flow of goods, and that includes labor. You have the inherent right to go to work for somebody if they agree, or live in a place if they agree to give you that rent. We support immigration reform because we support the free market, and we support a path to legal citizenship and legal status because that's the way that markets work, by not having to look over your shoulder before going to work every morning and breaking up families for breaking those laws.
Democrats, what?
Oh, is this one of these things where I'm like so far left I'm coming right again?
Yeah.
I
No,
don't.
it's actually one of the few points that that panel, I guess, is more liberal than some liberals.
No, I'm all for open borders.
No, open
I'll go
borders.
there.
If we can do it in a safe way, I'm for it too. I don't think anybody that's here. If you're an undocumented worker and you're paying taxes, sales taxes, you're not a criminal, you're not committing any crimes, you're just trying to make a better life for your family. I don't see why there's any reason why we don't grant you amnesty. I really don't see why. You're a benefit to our society. You're bringing in tax money. I don't understand why we would not give them amnesty.
So what specifically would you like to see be done through the government or through legislation to deal with current illegal immigrants and those who come here?
There should be a workers program that people are checked against criminal backgrounds to make sure that people aren't just coming in here with a criminal background that have a history of maybe working in organized crime or something like that, making sure that everyone's coming here and they have papers, and that way they have protections. Because right now people are coming here and they have this fear, like you just said, they have a fear that they're always going to get pulled over, families are going to get torn apart. And I believe that if you really want to come here and work, and you want to, like, even if you wanted to work on like some of the farms in California or something, plenty of people don't want to do that. There's always openings. If you want to do that, then go do it. If an American wants to do it, and they should get first priority because they're already a citizen, but everyone should have the opportunity to come over here legally and have the right to work.
I'd be interested on the Democratic point of view for this, but I would think we probably would agree on prioritizing the legal immigration side and fast-tracking those who are legally trying to do it.
Yes.
First. And make sure that they're taken care of, trying to go through the front door, trying to do it legally, because
there
are people that get caught in the loopholes trying to do it legally, and perhaps for some reason they get deported not out of their own will. They've been trying to do it right, and they paid lots of money and everything like that, and then they still get hard to drive for doing it right.
I agree with that. That you should. Why should you be punished if you've been waiting in line for that long? That doesn't make any sense.
I want to say that
so
it's the bureaucracy and the centralization of this issue that has made our broken system. We think that federal government can fix everything, including immigration, and this is why we have a broken system.
Unfortunately, they're the ones.
The answer is a free market way where we allow people to come in as they are needed by the market, and let government out of the way and protecting our borders for people that actually matter, not for the people that are coming here to get work or get a better education, but for those that want to actually do harm to us. You want to protect us, you want to make us safer, focus on those people, decrease government spending and decrease government bureaucracy and immigration, and you will see the market take over.
I would agree, but unfortunately it's in the Constitution that the government is going to be in charge of immigration, and no matter what, the federal government you can't have like state governments in charge of each port of immigration. You have the whole federal government that's in charge of our coasts and our Canadian border and the Mexico border, and I agree there needs to be less bureaucracy and a streamlined approach, just like you were saying, a streamlined approach to letting people in. That way it's efficient, that the background checks are done, because again, we can get a background check in 5 seconds for a gun. Why does it take 100 million years for someone from Canada or England or Mexico or Argentina or Honduras to come over here.
And we should be, providing more opportunities for them to earn their citizenship. Now, my family on both sides has a unique history. Part of my dad's family was escaping from Hitler, coming to the United States, while my great-grandfather was earning citizenship by fighting the Nazis, taking part in the invasion of France to liberate France from Hitler. So both of them earned their citizenships through World War II in different ways. So we should be promoting different ways like that. If you're here and you're willing to go into our military, you should become a citizen. If you're willing to lay your life on the line for this American dream that we have, then yeah, hell yeah, we should be given citizenship.
And the best way to give opportunities is to better your life is less taxes, less spending on government, and less regulation. That's why we are better. That's why there's more business here. That free market economics works because nobody's going in there telling you.
Let's focus on how it's
Carlos,
related
we were
to
agreeing
immigration.
for a hot second. Why'd you ruin it?
That's why they're immigrating here. That's why they're
Okay,
immigrating here.
I think we're gonna move on to questions from the audience. I'm glad we were able to end on a somewhat positive note, where we had Republicans and Democrats agreeing on something. A little bit of bipartisanship. For our viewers on the internet, thank you so much for watching, and stay tuned for our next ASU Democrats versus Republicans debate. This is Nihal Krishan signing off from the Memorial Union at Arizona State University. Thank you.